when he's not calling golf on PGA Tour Radio or basketball in the horizon, all the stuff, lacrosse, you do it all. Amateur golf on Golf Channel. He's writing. It's Will Haskett, man. How are you? Welcome to our show.
Hi, Mark. You know what it's like to call golf on the radio. I mean, yeah, that's old habit for you. You know, someday I'll be as pretty as you. I'll get the TV job.
Yeah, well, look, the accent adds like 10 IQ points. And the truth of it is that golf on the radio is, to me, a little more challenging. You paint pictures in the theater of the mind. So I'm going to let you tell the listeners about that and paint some pictures for them, please.
Oh, thank you. You know, it's you're talking about which way are we going with this one? You want me to like dissect your swing? You want me to go play by play?
Introduce yourself play by play style.
Okay. So yeah, this is really awkward, but I'll do it anyway.
Wait. I got to stop you first, though, folks, because this guy Will Haskett, right? We worked together in radio for a long time. He's one of my best friends on the tour. We were in Philadelphia at a very wet aerodromic, and this one will live with me for as long as I live.
Okay.
And we're in the middle of a show, and our producer, his name's Alan Trexler, goes by Trex, sometimes affectionately, says to Will, he goes, Will, you're bringing us back from break, and we're going to play the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the Will.
That's right. Song. Yeah.
And so Will brings us back, not just with a hello, welcome back to the show, but essentially a rap he devised in about a 3-minute break.
I did. Yeah.
It was genius, and to this day, I'm in awe of that performance. So I know you can do this.
Welcome back to On the Mark. There'll be no snark. Let's get right off to a flying start.
All right.
Let's take my new book and rip it apart. There you go. There's my rap. You ready? Was that good enough from a broadcasting standpoint?
Fantastic. And now I need to, before we talk about your new book, which is great, please tell the folks who might not be aware of you, because we're global, this podcast, a little bit about you, please.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously I've been calling sports my entire life. I don't know why I've had a lot of conversations about this recently. I'm that weird child that when he was 13 years old, decided this is what I wanted to do. And I've called 14 different sports in probably every medium all over the place. I just got back from the World Knife and Axe Throwing Championships, which you can catch coming up on ESPN throughout the course of the holidays. That's kind of a fun little niche audience of competitors, athletes, I guess you could say, that I'm going to do. I do have a basketball game next week, but yeah, about 90% of my work now, as you know, Mark, is in the golf space. And when I started on PGA Tour Radio was right around the time that you started on PGA Tour Radio. I thought you were going to go a different direction on our time at Aronimink when we had Sunday off and we just sat around a hotel with 3 engineered televisions that we had taken from everybody's rooms and way too much wine and bourbon and had a good old time. And we've had some total rainouts. Remember being rained out in the middle of nowhere in Texas doing a little amateur event called The Spirit. You and I have had a lot of days of no golf and time to just get to know each other and imbibe with each other a little bit. So I think that's probably why we're got such good friends. We've had rain out wine days way too often in our golf travels. But yeah, so 90% of my world is golf right now, mostly on PGA Tour Radio, a little bit of PGA Tour Live. And apparently I'm an author now, which is just weird to think of. It's weird.
It's super cool, and I commend you because it's a very well put together book. Now, honestly, if you could see the stack of books over here and then in the other room and on my bedside, there are thousands that I'm sort of partially the way through, but this one I've spent a lot of time reading, and I've sort of read and reread because it's so well put together, and it's called The Science of Golf, the math, the technology, and the data. And you reached out to me. It was during the COVID lockdown, and you said, "Look, I've got this. I'm going to be writing this book," and so we talked a little bit about it. And I thought it was a very novel idea given where the game is right now.
Yep.
And look, our audience download this thing to get golf tips, which we're going to give. But I first want you to tell us about the inspiration for this, apart from being timely. And then just because look, what you've got in here, this didn't come easy. There was a lot of research behind this, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. And thank you for the intro. And I think you might be the first quoted in it. So you're obviously a big part of the book, and our conversations over the years are a big part of this book. And that really was what the book sort of became. It was a way for me to put in writing kind of what I've learned in a decade of following the world's best. And I will say this wasn't an idea that I necessarily came up with. I was approached to write this book. It's part of a grander or larger series of sports science books. So there's a science of football, there's a science of baseball, there's a science of hockey coming out early next year. And the publisher approached me through one of the other authors and said, hey, you might be good to write this book. And I had just finished a 4-year run of hosting my own podcast called The Perfect Number, of which you were a guest on mine. We even did like a back and forth on this podcast and with that one a few years ago, I think actually during that rain out in Aronimink, ironically. And I'd had a lot of really smart people on the podcast as I sort of graduated from talking about data and analytics to technology and psychology and a number of these different factors that from a PGA Tour broadcaster perspective, I was fascinated by, because all of these guys are invested in tackling all of these various scientific elements of the game. And no sport is probably more scientific than golf because of all of the various factors, whether that's the fact that it's played outside on a completely different playing field, round to round, week to week, no matter where it might be, to all of the various apparati, whatever the appropriate word is there that we're using, 14 clubs in the bag, an actual ball, and now all of these sort of athletic advancements and scientific advancements that have added to that element of the game. And so in a long-winded way, and I apologize to the audience, I'm long-winded, especially when I get on podcasts, this book was really sort of me putting into writing all the stuff that I have learned. And it's very, very expert heavy. There's a lot of quotes in this book from top players to top minds like you, Mark, and everybody else around the game. And while I think it can be applied, and I have applied some of what I've learned to my own game, I really wrote it in terms of what I've learned about covering the world's best. And so what I want this book to be is, if you want to get better at golf, I think there's stuff in here you can learn and be better at golf. If you just want to watch the guys on the PGA Tour or the LPGA Tour play, and you want to understand a little bit more about what they're doing to get better, the book anecdotally sort of talks about them as well. So I feel like it's a book that just gives you a really good 10,000-foot view of what I consider to be the 9 sort of scientific areas that you can dive through the game, told through this lens that the last 25 years has really been this massive scientific advancement.
Yeah, you know what, you say that, and it sort of jogs my mind to say a little bit of, it is data heavy, but it's a surprisingly easy read.
I
Often
hope so. Yeah.
when you start to dive into data and analytics and this sort of stuff, it can get heavy. And I've just picked it up at times when I'm sitting on the couch. Heck, it went with me to the doctor's office the one morning because I knew it was going to be a wait because I was having one other scan. So I had like 35 minutes between the time, and I was just sitting there. And that's when I texted you because I found something that I was unsure about, and you texted me like, "Oh my goodness, was this a mistake?" And then we went back and forth a bit. And so it's an easy read and the kind of thing where you can read some, put it down a little bit, and then come back to it, and you can pick it right back up, if you know what I'm saying. It's not
Yes.
like you have to go and reread a little bit to find out where you were going, because each chapter, they work together, but they can also sort of stand alone, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I always thought if I ever wrote a book, it'd be something much more narrative heavy, more emotive, something of that nature. This is a very technical book. I mean, you can't really write a book that is science of something and not have it be a very technical book. But you're right. I tried to weave some narrative flow from some storytelling and things into each chapter to humanize some of these scientific elements. And there is a little bit of connective tissue. And in me putting it together, I tried to sort of put it in an order I thought made the most sense from a science standpoint. But you're absolutely right. If you put this book down and you just want to understand how the dimples of a golf ball impact how it flies and how weather then impacts that flight 18 months from now, that scientific process isn't going to change.
Yeah.
Like the aerodynamic and physics of how a golf ball moves through the air won't change. Now, the technology of those balls are going to change through the course of time. But if you want to pick it back up and sort of learn from that, you can. And here's the other thing. Well, I know we're going to transition to talking about people's golf games themselves. It's really, really hard to do what the best golfers do in focusing on all of these areas, both on and off the golf course. And maybe there's just one scientific component that is attractive to you or resonates with you. And that's what you can then apply to make yourself a better golfer or enjoy golf a little bit better. Because I'll be fully honest, if I invested in all 9 of these areas, learning them as much as I could and apply it to my own game, I'd have paralysis analysis or you know what I'm saying? And that's where I think at least find a thing that resonates with you in the book.
I'm glad you say that because, look, by definition, I guess the folks who download this one, they're information seekers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've the podcast is releasing, I think, as we speak right now. where I connected with guys from. He's actually a concert pianist, world
Sure.
award-winning concert pianist, and he's devised a thing called audio golf. It started with running and how he created this audio cue for a long distance runner, to run the laps faster. And so he comes and he works with clients and he watches them swing and he talks to the instructor and then builds like an audio thing to help them not be thinking too much about data and stuff, to take all that stuff and then apply it to just, there's an audio cue and now I'm going to
Yes.
be reactive and athletic. So I'm glad you say that. But before we dive into this, I feel like there's a healthy dose, obviously, of truth serum in here because it's data based. But just to help the listener, and you said it as much ago, if I took all 9 chapters and I tried this, I'd be my own worst enemy. I want you, because you're out there and I say it a lot, but I want a different voice to basically echo what I've been saying. For the club golfer listening, you've been out there watching the best win tournaments. You've been dispatched to groups that went bust quickly. Remember a whole bunch of those, right?
Oh, yeah.
So tell the viewers / listener, because you can watch this on YouTube, folks, how even the very best do not have their very best going on all of the time, please.
No, they don't. And I mean, when was the last time we saw a perfect round of golf? I don't even know what a perfect round of golf looks like.
You cannot define
for each individual person. You can have a really, really good round of golf, which a lot of this at the highest level now comes down to decision making and execution. So it's the marriage of the both of them, not just pulling the right club, but choosing the right target. And these are all things that we can trickle down into our own sort of games and understanding that. I think course management is something that I've seen derail the best rounds out there and derail my rounds too. I think we'll talk about that a little bit when it comes to the broader understanding of that. I think that's something that I've seen that has happened. But yeah, there's plenty of train wrecks out there. And you know me, I'm a huge stats and analytics guy. And it was funny, you were asking me before we came on here what I wanted to talk about. And I forgot to even talk about that element because I talk about it so much that I just kind of like forget that that's the thing that I talk about. Because honestly, the thing that most fascinates me right now that I wrote in the book and that I watch these guys do is psychology. I think these guys are investing so much in the mental side of the game because that's their 1% edge that they get. I know we're going to hit on some of the stuff that I wrote about in the book, but that to me is the best. When I cover a PGA Tour event, and you and I have talked about this, there's a 63-hole event and there's a 9-hole event. It's like we get to the back 9 on Sunday and then weird crap happens. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, it's the 6 inches between the ears that are impacting what happens there. It's a brain fart in terms of course management, or it's a guy that can dig deep and do something, or whatever it might be. And that psychological edge is fascinating to me as well. And that's something we can learn from.
I'm glad you say that. For all the strokes gained folks here, I'm on a different podcast with a few guys in Kyle Porter and company that are strokes gained. They bow at the altar of strokes gained. Now, look, it's helpful. It can direct practice and stuff like that. But not all tee shots are the same. I don't care if you're leading the tour strokes gained. There is a tee shot that's your kryptonite. And if you face that all day long, you probably wouldn't be the leading guy on strokes gained off the tee.
Right.
Not all 5-footers are the same. Not all approach shots are the same. You know, I can show you a ball that's hit to 10 feet with an approach shot from 200 yards.
Yep.
As you basically caught with your pants down. And I can show you a ball that's hit to 40 feet and you've probably got a better chance of making 4 than the guy who's 10 feet dead.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
We could have done an entire podcast on Mito Pereira's tee shot on the 72nd hole at the PGA Championship, which, by the way, I defend him hitting driver, and that's not a statistics and analytics answer. That's actually a psychology answer. It's just there were other elements leading up to that process that failed him in that particular moment. And he's always going to remember for why did he take the driver? Why didn't he bunt a 4-iron down the middle? Whatever it might be. But we could do an entire, and there's no right or wrong answer. I hate the fact that he was skewed for one particular decision. He could have easily shanked the 4-iron into the creek. I happen to defend his decision, but I think it's a brilliant psychological and analytical conversation. We could do 30 minutes. One person takes one side, one person takes the other, and no one would ever be right or wrong. And that's what makes the game beautifully chaotic, I think.
Folks, remember, I teed this up saying Will and I are like good friends, right? When we began our friendship, we worked in the same crew and it was a certain amount of curiosity about each other because I think he sounds great. And he always seems to have the right thing to say at the right time. And he pronounces his words fantastically well. And I tend to trip over my own lips. I'm doing it now. But you were staunch strokes gained and I was staunch not strokes gained.
Yeah.
And we've almost kind of moved to the middle of the thing because that is the beauty of this game that we get to watch from so close, right?
No doubt about it. And look, I think, and this is the only thing I'll be comfortable completely bashing most of my peers in the golf broadcasting business about. I don't think we use data and stats enough in the broadcast that we do. But I also think that when we do use it, we don't provide the proper context, or we use the stats in an improper way in certain times. And it's hard. There has to be a dance that is with them. I can throw out a number of strokes gain statistics in the course of a broadcast that 80% of my audience won't understand unless I give them the proper context. And I could also throw out a stat that tells a story that actually isn't as accurate as it might be. So it's taking a moment to step back and understand those. This is a different podcast for a different time. I want to see more advanced analytics and statistics used in my broadcasts, in your broadcasts, and all the places where golf is consumed. But we need to be educated in terms of the context of using those in a particular way. I think we'll get there a little bit with some advanced overlays and some graphics packages that I think we could do in the next couple of years. But you're right. It's not everything, but it's definitely one of the best sports to have stats in that can help us tell way better stories than before, when we were just greens and regulation and fairways hit, and we were trying to determine who was hitting the ball well based off of those archaic stats.
Yeah, that's awesome. And for the listeners and the viewers to this, if you listen to me on television, you listen to Will on the radio, we both try our very best to put context to whatever statistic or graphics that's shown.
Yep.
Like if there's a John Rahm standing on the tee, let's call it number 14 at Torrey Pines, because it's coming up and he plays that golf course very well. But I will bet you my bottom dollar that John Rahm off that tee, as accurate as what he is, will miss that thing down in the right rough.
Yep.
If the announcer comes up there and says, well, here's Rahm with driver, this guy's next to automatic, I'll be like, yeah, but this situation over here, and you place some why to a situation, and that's what makes someone worth their while. I feel like
I agree.
Commentary, the pundits on it.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Right, here we are. We're going to help golfers improve. We're also going to tease Jem a little bit with some insights that you're going to share just to help our golfers, our listeners, our tribe to improve their game. And these are not necessarily in chapter order, but remember, you can go to this book and break down these concepts. Number one you wanted to talk about, Will, was understanding how or why the ball flies the way it does, and the relationship between club face to path, which I don't think you need to camp on too much, because most folks who are listening to this regularly, they get it. But let's talk about how the ball flies like it does.
Yeah, I mean, you're my number one witness, by the way. This is chapter 1, and this is why I went back and forth and debated it. Some people say you lead a book on the science of golf with the ball or the clubs or something that makes sense. I led with effectively launch monitors and how they've changed how we've looked at the game over the last 25 years, because I don't know if there's a scientific development that's as important to our understanding of golf now, then, and in the future as launch monitors. Go ahead.
If I might cut in there, you quoted me in here, and I would comfortably say when I started teaching back when Moby Dick was a minnow, in 1995 or whenever it was, I was armed with a Sony Handycam, and that was it.
Yep.
Now the camera is almost the Handycam has become a phone,
right?
It's next to obsolete because everyone's traveling around with a launch monitor. So off you go.
Right. And the camera now can do an entire body scan of you in 3D, which is chapter 2 with what Ji-Hae Lee and all those folks have done, which is way above my pay grade. But back to the actual launch monitor, and we talked about this in the chapter. I mean, the interview I had with you on the record for this book, and it sort of changed the way we looked at instruction. So it used to be the means justify the ends, and now the ends justify the means. So if the ball is doing what we want it to do off of the club face, then it really justifies a lot of the stuff that's getting to that particular point. And to this idea of club to path, and we now have this absolute understanding of why the ball flies the way that it does. It's a relationship of how the club is oriented as it makes contact with the golf ball in relation to the path of that actual club. So if it is open to that path, then we know it's going to slice. If it's closed to that path, then we know it's going to draw. And the starting position of the ball just happens to go with where the path is. Yeah. And why I think that's so important for the average golfer is, look, I don't get on TrackMan a lot for my own game. Okay. I can do it a couple of times. I have a really bad swing, and I'm glad that I've gotten to a place now where I can justify my bad swing if my results are there. And I invested in my own game this past summer and got my handicap down to what I think is an acceptable level for where I am in my journey. And it just really spent time. But what I think about when I reflect on this chapter of the book, Mark, is that when I'm out in the golf course and the ball just isn't doing what I expected it to do, what would I used to have to do? I'd have to just patchwork it together, like figure out a foot cheat or some stance sort of thing or a ball position thing to just get to the 18th hole and then get to the range and start working through repetition or have somebody look at me to do it. Well, now I know, oh, I just hit a push cut. The ball sliced and it started right of my intended target line. I know that that's a relationship now of where my path was and where my club face was. And I can make subtle adjustments on the fly in the round to be able to try and correct that. Now, it's not going to be great. I'm not going to say every swing is going to be fully in rhythm, but now from the 5th hole to the 7th hole, I'm not fully guessing and losing my mind. I'm like, I know exactly why my ball went where it is because of what two things were happening, what my club face was doing and where my path was. And I can make an adjustment on the fly now to at least try and salvage that round of golf. And 20 years ago, I mean, it's hope no one presses, hope I don't have an auto 2-down game going and like get to the range without having lost as much money. And now I feel like I can at least kind of get my way through a round of golf, understanding, oh, okay, this is why that happened, and maybe even tweak it and find my swing a little bit faster. And it seems so simple, but we just didn't know that. We felt like we had to go back and look at the whole swing to figure out why I was doing it. It's like, no, I can either shut it down or open it, whatever it happens to be. I hope that makes sense.
It does. And here's my take. This is not proven in data, but all of the great golfers I've talked to, Nick Price stands out because he's like a mentor to me. And Nick Price has always said, he goes, I began to win major championships when I figured out how to survive my bad day and make it decent.
Right.
And back then in the day, it was essentially, I guess, like an intimate awareness of self and what tendencies were. So then when stuff wasn't going right, you don't sort of double down on the attack or whatever the case might be. You realize, hold on, I'm not in my purple patch now. And I've got to figure just to sort of survive this until I get back on the wave, if you will. And back then it was like, all right, I know maybe if I open my stance, I can go to this go-to shot, or if I move the ball position forward, it eliminates one side of the target, or just little tweaks that were discovered by stance, by digging it out of the dirt, to use a Hogan.
Correct.
Nowadays, when you get a launch monitor behind you, you can realize, well, this relationship's happening. And so I make this tiny little tweak and I'm get the ball more functional and in front of me. And so to me, Will, I believe it's kind of leveled the playing field a little bit. And that's why week in, week out on the PGA Tour, for argument's sakes, you're seeing all manner of players contend because they just got to find it that 1 week. Where back in the day, it was all about consistency because these guys knew sort of how to survive and thrive, even though they didn't have their best for a year long.
Yeah, say you're a right-handed golfer, you're fighting a hook, and you just move the ball in the back of your stance. Why does it hook less? Well, it's because your face isn't as shut down when you make impact with the golf ball. So you're doing one thing to actually impact something else, whereas now we know that you can just start at the actual root cause of that contact with the golf ball. And maybe it still involves moving the ball. Maybe it still involves opening up your stance if you're fighting a hook because your body's going to release earlier. You're going to drag a little bit and maybe open the face. I mean, there's cause and effect that goes into it. But I think we now just have a much broader understanding. You used to have to pay somebody who is a professional to look at your swing and tell you why it's doing what it's doing. Now you can understand what your tendencies are. And I just think that's such empowering information. Like you have more control because you have more knowledge of your actual golf game. And there's a lot of stuff that works into it too. I mean, again, saving a bad round of golf is a combination of understanding why your swing is missing. It's also maybe a recalibration of, look, I'm going to take more conservative lines into greens or whatever it might be. Like, let's eliminate big numbers. Let's eliminate penalty areas. I mean, there's a lot of ways to save a round of golf that we have other information for, but I wanted to lead with that because I led the book with contact. I think it's the most important part of it. And now that we understand the true nature of what happens to a golf ball based off of those physics of club path and face to path relations, it's a game changer in how we look at the game.
It truly is. And it sort of galvanizes 2 points. First off, I'm doing this Advent golf series, and one of the tips I just got from the tour, because a few of these tips are just insights from me being inside the ropes and seeing the common denominator between all these guys, whether their swings look the same or not, is they all eliminate big numbers.
Yep.
That's one of them. And that was one of the tips that I had. And then secondly, to that strokes gained thing, even though the guy might be leading the tour, strokes gained, there are just certain days where he's not feeling it.
Right.
And then you can't stand there and go, well, he's leading the tour, strokes gained. The guy can't really find the broadside of a barn right now. So everything he's doing is he's positioning the ball in a place where we're just going to stay alive for a while. So let's say that push cut's happening, like you're saying. Well, he knows it's pushed and he knows it's cutting. So I've seen Tiger Woods do this, in fact, with my own two eyes at the Players Championship, aiming at a 45-degree clip to the target line and essentially push fading that thing off his body alignment just to sort of stay in the match.
Yep, absolutely. And we've had a couple of good examples of it in recent years. Colin Morikawa, I think 2 years ago, after he had won the Open Championship and then had a little bit of an injury and his ball just stopped fading. He's aiming at the same place and the ball just wouldn't fade. And then a couple times it drew, which would drive him absolutely crazy. Dustin Johnson fought this a couple of years ago when he was at the peak of his powers. Like, he'd set up for that patented cut and it just wouldn't cut. He'd have a ball that would go straight and fall a little bit left. And he thought he was doing the same thing over and over again. And I understand that can be a completely debilitating situation where you don't feel any different. You don't feel like that path is any different or the face is any different at impact, but you can see it even from some of the world's best. And they had to continue sort of recalibrate. Okay, well, why does it feel this way? Is my body now reading my hands differently? Do I have to actually change the perception of my feel because I now have the evidence that it's doing what it's always, what it's doing now, as opposed to what it always did, and have to make that change. And so, it can be maddening, but they at least now can quickly know, oh, well, this has to be happening because of X, Y, and Z. Now I have to figure out how to feel X, Y, and Z the same way I felt what my typical swing felt like beforehand.
Yeah. Face is king, path is queen. I say that to people all the time. Point number 2, and that's sort of a follow-on from this, I guess you sort of segued the thing already. It's investing in your body, and that is investing in your golf game. And you speak of Dustin Johnson, Colin Morikawa. To a man, these guys nowadays, Trevor, my brother, said to me at the 22 President's Cup, he goes on the hotel room floor, they had a room with ice baths in there. Mm-hmm. He goes, she's never in my, I think I ice bathed like twice in my entire career. These guys were doing it every night. And that's sort of who these people are. And they're investing completely in themselves and not just in their golf swing, for argument's sake.
Yeah, and let's not even go the full distance. I mean, we get into whoop bands in here and these guys tracking in their sleep. There's obviously fitness. Yeah, you got your on. I mean, these guys are tracking everything. I mean, they are well-tuned machines. And to the average golfer, you, me, anybody else that's listening out there, look, I'm going to have 2 glasses of wine tonight. Probably going to have 2 glasses of wine tomorrow night. I'm going to have pizza with my kids tonight. Like, I'm not living a professional athlete existence here. But what I can say is I do appreciate exercising. I have changed my exercise routine over the last couple of years based off of the science that we have from some of the best physio guys that are out there. I do more explosive work now. I do more jumps. I do more sprints than I ever did before. A lot of that's in the book because golf, while being an athletic sport, is an explosive sport. You're doing one thing for 1 second, maybe 70, 80, or 100 times around. And that doesn't, well, that's including putting. The actual swing, you're doing what, like 40 times, 50 times, maybe over the course of a round of golf for 1 second. It's less than a minute worth of actual athletic physical behavior that you're doing. So why would I run 5-6 miles? Why would I do, lots of little weights for a lot of reps?
Yeah.
You want to do things that are explosive. So you can get in the best shape of your life, but then also tailor that program to being golf specific so that you can gain 2 or 3 yards off the tee or 1 mile an hour of club head speed. Or maybe you don't even gain speed at all, but in gaining the right lower body strength, the right core strength, the right flexibility in things, you just become more stable, which means your misses now are more in a tunnel as opposed to being wide of the park. There's some great anecdotes. I mean, guys on the PGA Tour weren't working out before Tiger Woods showed up. Now every single guy has a trainer. Every single guy is trying to get stronger. It's crazy.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say there was one guy that was working out. In fact, he still is, and he's 89.
That's true.
Young and
tip of the cap. Tip of the cap to your guy, Gary.
Hey, to what Will says, reminder for the folks, if you haven't listened, Chris Finn from Par 4 Success was on here. And he, if you go listen to the podcast, they developed a web page. I mean, they do wonderful work And for all the On the Mark listeners, you go there and you type, I think the code was On the Mark. You'd have to go and see it. I can't, it slips my mind. But they're giving everyone who listens to this an assessment.
Yeah, I've done it.
Yeah, to recommend what they would need to work on. And I feel like in the era of data and know-how, if you will, being aware of who you are, what you're capable, what you more importantly not capable of doing, is crucial really to working on the right stuff and really making inroads on golf improvement.
Yeah, it's 2 minutes every night. I do one particular hip stretch, like one little hip stretch. That's where I'm okay in the shoulders and the arms. I've got good flexibility there. I do an assessment. I realize that I don't have as much hip flexibility and some certain things that are probably in my now early 40s going to continue to hold me back. Like I have lost several miles an hour off of my fastball in the last 4 or 5 years, and trying not necessarily to gain back the speed that I once had, but just be able to have a fastball once or twice around when I need it, and then maintain my speed where it is right now for the next 6 or 7 years to keep the level where I'm at. There's plenty of maintenance that can be done that doesn't have to be comprehensive 2 hours a day like these guys are doing. It's just take the exercises you're already doing, if you are somebody who is inclined that way, and just shift them in a more golf appropriate sort of way. And that's something I've done, because I used to think, Mark, I'd go out, I'd run 3-4 miles. You've been around, I would just go pound pavement for 3 or 4 miles. And I'll still do that once in a blue moon for the cardio aspect of it, but I can get good cardio doing interval training. So I'll sprint a 1/10 of a mile and then walk a hill for a 1/4 of a mile. Then I'll go back and I'll sprint that mile. I'm still getting the strength. I'm still getting the mileage, but now I'm doing this a cardio related workout that's also building up leg strength. And it changes the way that your body could then be more consistent on a golf course. And we now have the science to back it up. And it's very new science. I mean, the workouts that Tiger was doing 25 years ago, not good. I mean, not golf appropriate. But now here we are. We've learned more and more and more, and these guys are doing better stuff.
Rest is crucial, folks. This Whoop, it's made a big difference in my life. Go to join.whoop.com/on-the-mark. Get your Whoop Band 4.0 for free, and you can get 1 free month. Will you go and do it? Okay. I can see giggling over there.
Yeah. No, I just your ad placement stuff is on. Yeah, it's just perfect so far. You don't know any of the codes or anything. This is great. This is awesome.
Well, I wasn't planning on placing ads. This is where my mind goes. Speaking of mind, point number 3 you wanted to make of 5 is balancing your brain. Embracing the process is difficult, but in the end, in as much as what it's cliched, it sort of works. You hear the pros go, well, I got to stick to the process.
Yes.
So go there, please.
Yeah, the most fascinating chapter I wrote was on psychology, and a lot of it features the research of Debbie Cruz, who's a brain neuroscience psychology expert at Arizona State. And unfortunately, our schedule didn't align to be able to get together. We went back and forth, and I just couldn't get her before the deadline to write the book. So I had to take a lot of stuff from things that were out there, and it was the most fascinating stuff that I researched. And it's effectively, they have found that the best athletic movement, so whether it's hitting a 10-foot putt, a free throw, whatever it might be, comes from people who are completely balanced in their brain. It's when the activity in the left brain matches the activity level of the right brain. When you are balanced as in the brain, your body then is balanced in whatever the activity is. It's sort of the cure of the yips, right? And so when you talk about process, all these guys talk about process. I'm sticking to the process. I'm sticking to this process. It's visualization. So what it means is that you're doing both activities and you're calming things down. So golf is a very left-brained activity, right? You're taking in information, data, on making a calculated decision. What club do I want to hit? That's fine. That's what your left brain needs to do. But if you're heavily left brain dominant when you stand over the golf ball, which means you're over calculating, you're not going to have your most optimal swing. So how do we get into the right brain? That's why you see guys stand behind the golf ball and visualize down the line. Because what are they doing? They're visualizing what the ball is going to do. That means they're imagining. When you trigger your imagination, you're triggering your right brain. When you're thinking positive things, so you're reflecting back on positive memories, that is a right-brained activity. You're turning on your right brain to start to take away the value of the left brain. It's already made the calculation. So the left brain calculated. Now the right brain visualizes what the left brain calculated. You get them perfectly in sync. You hit your best shot. Because if you're standing over it, still thinking wind, number, yardage, all this other sort of stuff, you're not going to be at your best. And it was the most fascinating discovery. I think I just gave away half of the chapter. I'll try and leave some of it in there for those that go and buy it. but it is so hard, Mark, to stay in that process. I have tried it in particular rounds. It's easy to get distracted. It's easy to have a conversation. It's easy to be rushed. It's easy to be backed off on something. It is mentally exhausting. I don't know how these guys at the PGA Tour do it as regularly as they do. But when you do it and you're in that mental zone, it is a beautiful thing to watch. Beautiful.
I have, spoken with a lot of folks about this, because it's kind of, to me, the uncharted territory, truthfully. In fact, I've just interviewed a guy called Dr. Izzy Justice, who's done 13,000 plus brain scans on athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And in these brain scans, he shows where the areas of the brains are sort of highlighted during certain activities and disturbances and stuff. And they essentially develop neurohacks, whether it's breathing properly, and you calming the vagal response, like you're going from sympathetic to parasympathetic, the nervous systems, because there's two. And you're so right, breathing, balancing this area between the two. It truly is, I feel like, where the sweet spot lies, because you can go practice golf shots until the cows come home. When you ramp pressure up, it becomes a different animal, doesn't it?
And practice becomes a real mental block too. Like, how many people, me included, are guilty of hitting balls too quickly? You just get out there and you start beating balls. You're out of rhythm. Rhythm, dance, music, all that stuff is a right-brained activity. You get your body out of rhythm, and then all of a sudden your right brain is taxed because it's not in its happy place. So the cadence of your walk, the slowness of your breath, the ability to keep your brain balanced and happy is an important part of it. And I know we want to try and whittle these down into the nice nuggets that people can take away and apply to your actual game. And the easiest way I can do that is just work through visualization exercises. So do it on the range as well. Step back from the ball, look down the range, visualize the shot you're going to hit, walk into it, take that breath, and get yourself in that habit of doing it. And then do that on the golf course. Do all of your calculation, take your laser out, get it out there, look at the wind. Okay, I got this calculated. I've got everything. Agree 100%. This is what I'm doing. I'm hitting this shot. No more doubts. Stand behind it. Visualize what you just decided, what your left brain just calculated to do. You've agreed to that, 100% committed to it. Now visualize it. Imagine it being executed. Walk in. You should be balanced. You should be more balanced. You should hit better shots.
Yeah, Dr. Mike Gravlos has been on the show a couple times. He's also done studies on how the brain works. He says the brain loves a goal, and that visualization process I speak of is essentially goal setting for the mind. All right, number 4, get fit for clubs and embrace new club technology. Yes, husbands, and this is your excuse to go and buy yourself that brand new driver you wanted for Christmas.
It is. There's really no discussion. I mean, every single year, some of it is big marketing budgets, but for the most part, these club manufacturers are just making better products. So the drivers are capped. You know this, Mark. I mean, I spent way too much time in the book on the stealth technology at TaylorMade in this book, because you know what? It was fascinating when I was writing the book, and it's going to be obsolete probably in 2 or 3 years, but it was pretty cool. 20 years worth of research that TaylorMade did to get there. And the drivers have really reached a point where I'm still swinging a driver that's 3 or 4, actually it's probably 5 or 6 years old, because I like the feel of it. And the extra 4 or 5 yards that I get from a new driver doesn't necessarily gain me as much as I like from the comfort of my current driver. But I will say this, we're now starting to see iron technology over the last 3 or 4 years apply many of the same principles that the driver manufacturers were doing for the last 15, 20 years. So whether that's, we're moving the center of gravity, moving the weight to the outside edges, stability, and then adding speed and explosiveness to these irons, it's incredible. And so if you're not getting fit and you're not looking into new pieces of technology, and if your irons are more than 6 or 7 years old, you're leaving a club worth of distance in the bag right now or on the golf course right now. So it's really simple. Like, there's a right ball for you. There's better clubs for you. There's a right driver for you. If you haven't gotten fit at this age in 2022, 2023, then you're leaving strokes and distance on the table. You just are.
Yeah, the ball is crucial because it's the only part of the equipment you use on every shot.
Yep.
But then me, I'm a stickler. I love a spinny wedge shot. I stand in awe of a Rory McIlroy drive. It's biblical. But skill around the greens to me is where golf scores are made and then restored in a way, because everyone's going to miss. When Tiger Woods was in his heyday, played some of the best golf, I think, in the history of ever.
Mhm.
He'd hit 13 greens on average around, which means that he'd have to make 5 saves if he didn't make any birdies to shoot
Sure.
par. And he speaks of this. So the ability around the greens is crucial. So to the equipment thing, keep grooves fresh. If you hit a lot of range balls with your wedge, those grooves get dulled. And so the way the ball's going to respond, not just on the green, but through the air, because spin and
Mhm.
speed influence flight. So
Yep.
if you're wondering why that ball's not doing like it should, it's probably that the grooves aren't as good as they were.
The other thing too, from a wedge standpoint, and I threw this in the book kind of last minute because I hadn't even thought about it, but just lie and bounce too.
Yeah.
Like, do you know how your wedge interacts with the turf on a normal swing with your 52 or your 56 or whatever it might be? And, do you just buy the same bounce in both of those wedges without thinking about what you actually use those shots for? Like, I have virtually no bounce in my lob wedge because I really don't hit it. I like hitting field shots with my 56, even if it's a 60-yard or 65-yard shot. I'm much happier with a little bit more bounce in my 56, clipping that ball and playing shots even from tight lies. And I need my lob wedge to have little bounce because I'm using that to extract myself out of tight situations around the green or hit, short-sided bunker shots or whatever it might be with my 60. So knowing and understanding what you want, what your tendencies are, and even dialing in some of those bounces. I mean, how many times do you get $100 gift certificate out of a golf outing? You're like, oh, I need a new 56. You just walk in, you just grab one, and you don't even look at, oh, does this have 10, 14? Like, what's the bounce on this sucker? Is it even the same bounce as the wedge you had before? Like those little things. You can get a wedge fitting. You can get a putter fitting. I mean, you can get fit for everything. And we have the technology now to learn your tendencies and your comforts so well that you shouldn't have a set that isn't dialed in. And I understand it's expensive. So I know that there's plenty of people in this audience, and I get it too. Like, I rolled my eyes the first time I went and got fitted, and I was like, oh my gosh, it costs how much just for the actual fitting? I understand it. But if you're invested at all in your success, you'll find a way over time to make sure that your set is optimized for you.
Putter fitting. I recently got one of those Axis One putters, the one that Justin Rose uses.
Yeah.
Freaking mind blowing, man. It's mind blowing. Anyway, but I digress. Last one, and I've kept you for a long time. You did qualify that this one should have been number 2, and we've sort of touched on it some, but I just want you to put a bow on the conversation with optimizing your body's movement. That too was a chapter in the book.
Yeah, it is chapter 2. So it comes right after contact, and it's all the science that's out there. Dr. Phil Cheatham features heavily into it. We talk about the Sportsbook AI app that GA Lee has developed and everything, and just understanding that there is an optimized movement of the body in terms of getting the most energy transfer into your swing. And so it doesn't mean that a shallow swing or an upright swing is better or not. Like, we talk about that in chapter 1, Mark.
Preach,
Like,
brother. Yes.
it is like you can swing your swing. So don't say that there's no optimized actual golf swing, but there's an optimized timing to how your body dances within your own swing. So that means where it's driving from. So you want a little bit of a pelvic lean, and then your hips fire everything into the swing. So if all of a sudden your hands start your downswing, you're going to lose speed because your body's trying to catch up to it. So we've discovered through science, I say we, like I did anything, but these people way smarter than me discovered that there is actually a synchronization to the body's movement that optimizes the speed with which your body swings your swing. And understand it. And this is the most complicated chapter, right? This is the one that took me the longest, Mark, because I truly don't understand half the words that are in here. And it's really difficult to grasp, but it is just 4 parts of the body. So if you get a little bit out of whack, you get a little bit out of rhythm, maybe you just sort of work on some timing movements in your actual body. Read chapter 2 of my book. You'll get to understand kind of what the kinematic sequence is and how it talks through the golf swing itself. But the beauty of it, I think there's the chance to be more artistic than ever before in our golf swings. You can do what you want. There's a kid at Oklahoma, Patrick Welch. I keep talking about him when I'm doing this book tour because I spent some time with him. He swings cross-handed since he was 2 years old. Every teacher in America would have had him quit that 30 years ago. He's doing it now because he flushes it and his numbers like bear it out, but his body still can probably move in the most efficient way. And that's what I found fascinating in this one. So find your swing, but then get it in timing, get that rhythm with your body, and you'll optimize it.
My hero said, Bobby Jones, my hero, Bobby Jones, said that teaching timing was the hardest thing to teach.
Yeah.
Whoever would eventually figure that out is essentially unlocking the secret to the golf swing. And the term you used, kinematic sequencing, is the term that gets thrown around. And simply, folks, if you just think body, arms, club,
Yeah, that's it.
back, and then body, arms, club coming down, you're going to be on your way. Now it's
so no, other way around. Clubs, arm, body, back. You said it the other way. You said body first on the way back.
Yes, but here's the thing. I tend to want to go the other way because you're right. The club goes the longest journey, so it should go first. But I want people to understand how they put force on that club, because I can move the club back by just jerking on my hands like this. So I want everything to sort of feel like it's moving, because essentially it's all coming from the core. So it's and to build on that, Nick Felder said to me, I asked him one time, I'm like, most important thing in the swing. And he took a beat, and then he quickly came back with, understand that the club head's got the farthest journey to travel. Make sure it moves the most. Because he was talking like you were. But then as he was doing that, you could see how the middle was moving in support of this thing. And you want these things to arrive there in time on the way down.
Yeah.
It's
probably more. One of the simplest things I learned in this book too, it's a Sasha McKenzie sort of discovery in a study that he had done. And he talked about just hand path. And we talk about distance and all this stuff. We're working out, we're optimizing stuff. Like the easiest way for the average golfer to swing faster or to swing with more speed is to just increase the distance the hands travel. So that goes back to flexibility. I mean, if you can just work on the swing and work on body motion, if it's a little bit of hip rotation that allows you to take your hands up just a little bit farther in the duration of the swing, that means it's a little bit farther. If it's a centimeter or 2 centimeters or 1.5 inches more that those hands have to travel to get back to the golf ball, that's more time to develop speed. And so it's all sort of tied into it. It's very, very simple. Like just make your hands travel a farther distance and you can hit the ball harder. Like it seems so simple, and yet there's a lot of synchronization of different moves that have to happen to get to that point. But it was one of the most sort of like, oh yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Like if I can just get my hands back a little bit more here, now let's figure out what steps I need to do with my particular unique swing to make that happen.
Yeah, the teacher in me, I can't resist now. So I just want to sort of package that by saying that's where I've got no problem with the body moving too, but understand it's a circular movement. I'm not sliding and back and forth.
No.
I'm just turning my middle and allowing things to travel, as opposed to like, all right, well, Haskett's just said that I must swing my arms farther back. Then the next thing you have this person waving.
Yeah, don't cast it. Yeah.
So you know where I'm going.
I do.
Will, the book is great. People, I think this would make an awesome stocking stuffer for your favorite golfer and maybe even yourself. So share with them where they can get it, please.
Yep. The Science of Golf, the Math, Data, and Technology, or actually Math, Technology, and Data. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, most of your major online book retailers. Get it there. If you do buy it and you like it at all, we'd love a nice review from you as well. But yeah, I appreciate the platform. You were so great. You've always been gracious with your time. My learning journey has involved a lot of great conversations with you, some over wine, some over coffee. You're the only one that drinks coffee. So typically I'm the one that's always drinking wine, but I appreciate that so much from you. I appreciate how much you were a part of this book and how much this podcast has been a part of my life as well.
It was my thrill when I opened the book and I got to like the 3rd page and I saw my name quoted. I'm like,
yeah. I forgot. Are you the first quote? Let me see here. Let's see. Contact. Okay. You are. Yep. You're the first quote. Middle of page 2. There you go.
I actually texted my wife. I'm like, wow, Will did quote me. And yeah, very cool. It's not why I'm endorsing this, folks. It truly is good stuff and it will help you. Will, tell people where they can find you, Will Haskett, please.
I'm on Twitter at Will Haskett. That's about the only place you can interact with me, but DMs are always open. So come on by if you want to chat. And we'll got a robust schedule coming up on PGA Tour Radio next year. And I'm not sure the timing of everything dropping pretty relatively soon here. Mark, is everything dropping relatively quickly here?
Yeah, it'll be out within the next few days. So it'll be, it's part of my Christmas Advent series. So this will be out very shortly.
Yeah. Golf Channel coming up in this upcoming week did a thing out in Scottsdale called the PXG College Showcase. 6 of the best college players playing for charity. A lot of fun to get to know. I'm a huge college golf supporter. And it's a great marketing opportunity for these young kids to sort of have a show about them for 2 hours at a beautiful location. So it's something I'm always proud of. So take a look for that on Golf Channel here over the month of December.
He's Will Haskett. Thanks for your time, man. Appreciate you.
See you, boss.